live stream. Okay, now we are, live streaming. Okay, let's begin with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu
Torah.
All right, well, I know it has been a rough week for all of us and HAMAKOM, but I hope that we can engage in some Torah learning to remind us that at the end of the day, our job as Jews is la'asok b'divrei Torah, to deal with, to engage with the study of Torah as a way of perhaps growing our souls as well as our minds, and finding ways to be better human beings in this world. So with that, we are at the very end of the book of Exodus this week, Parshat Pikudei. And there are some wonderful opportunities at Shul this coming Shabbat. There's an African Shabbat Friday night where we will be bringing in the music of all of our Jewish communities in Africa with Justin Stein, and then Shabbat morning, 2 services, a Zamru Shabbat with Cantor Jenny Asher and myself and our regular Neshama. And in all of those, we will be discussing the wisdom of this Torah portion. But why not today jump right in? So let me share the screen with you. And here we go. So what does the book of Exodus conclude with? Well, for the last 4 parshiot, we have been dealing with, or 4 out of the last 5 parshiot, dealing with the construction of the tabernacle. And this week we conclude the construction of the tabernacle and prepare ourselves to march forward into the wilderness, although there will be the entire book of Leviticus that doesn't see us moving forward, but giving us additional instructions on how to use the tabernacle for the purposes of a sacrificial system. But we are ready to move forward. And in moving forward, the question is, how are we going to be in this world? How do we live the life that God wants from us? If the tabernacle is supposed to be a dwelling place for God within us, right? Asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, it says in Parshat Truma, build me a sanctuary so that I can dwell amongst you or within you. How do we do it? How do we actualize the idea of the tabernacle in our lives? That's what this first text is dealing with. The first text is called from the Chidushei Harim, and it bases itself upon this one verse in Exodus 38. Vayihi me'e kikar hakesef letzeket et Adonai HaKodesh ve'et Adonai HaParochet me'et Adonim lema'at hakikar kikar la'aden. The 100 talents of silver were for casting the sockets of the sanctuary, and the sockets for the curtain, 100 sockets to the 100 talents, a talent, a socket. Now, that seems like a very, very technical detail about how to build the sockets that are going to hold the poles of the Mishkan in place. Remember, hold on one second, George. Remember that the question in the mind of our Hasidic masters is, how do we take the details of the building of the tabernacle that were relevant to the construction of the tabernacle and apply them to our lives today so that the building of the Mishkan, which, doesn't exist anymore, principally the values of that building of the Mishkan can exist. So the Mishkan becomes a metaphor, so to speak, for the life that we live today. And that's what the Chidushei Harim is going to share with us. But first, George, yes.
Yeah, it's a whole bigger picture here where that is a key car or a talent is 3,000 shekels in weight. Okay.
6,000. I thought, are you 3,000 or
No, no,
6,000?
it's 3,000.
Oh, I thought it was 6,000.
No, no.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a half shekel would be 6,000 of them. Okay. But a shekel is 3,000. So because the Jews, 20,
Right.
the
I don't get that. A
males,
half a shekel is 6,000 and a shekel is 3,000.
yeah, 3,000 shekels to a
Right.
talent. It's 6,000 half shekels.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah. Yeah. No, yes.
Okay, so that's how it's
6,000
going to
half
come in
shekels.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so because there were 603,550 males who were sinning the golden calf, they had to repent. And one of the ways is they contributed silver, a half shekel. First year it went into the tabernacle, then after that it went into sacrifices. So 100 times 3,000, that's 300,000. And there were 1,775 whatever shekels weight to tie the tops of these boards. So that came to whatever, a half of, I think, whatever, 301,775, half of, in shekels, because each one gave a half shekel to the number of males. And that's given in the first part of Bamidbar, of Numbers, the census of the males.
So in other words, what George is saying is that if you do the math, you can see
Yeah.
that there's hidden meaning in the numbers that are used
Yeah.
to describe the building of the Mishkan,
Yeah.
those hidden numbers relating to tshuva, repentance,
Yeah.
that was necessary by the Israelites. So in a sense, George, that's exactly what the Hidushei Harim is also saying.
Yeah.
He takes it from a different angle.
Yeah.
So let's read what he says. He says there were 100 sockets in the Mishkan,
Mhm.
and we are obligated to recite 100 blessings each day. Just as the sockets were the foundation of the Mishkan, so too are the blessings, the foundation of the holiness we experience each day.
Right.
The word for socket is Aden, which has affinity with the word for sovereignty, Adinut, like from Adon, or Adonai, Baruch atah Adonai. By reciting the 100 blessings each day, we testify that God is Adon. God is our master of all creation. In this way, the 100 blessings create the spiritual foundation for our inner Mishkan.
Yeah, they could have
So-
said 3,000 shekels per base, but they said one talent. They said it so it came to 100.
Okay.
They could
Thank
have said the other way. Yeah.
Okay. So let's take a look and see, what is the Hidushei Harim trying to do? It's actually quite a brilliant commentary, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And obviously we're going to dig down and try to understand it. What is the purpose of this commentary? What he's saying is, he's saying that there is a correlation that he's making between the number of sockets that existed that structurally supported the building of the Mishkan. Without those sockets, the Mishkan wouldn't exist as a Mishkan. And he's correlating those 100 sockets with the fact that Jews are obligated to recite 100 blessings every day of our life. And he's saying that the 100 blessings that we recite are similar to the sockets, which were necessary for the building of the foundation of the tabernacle. In other words, just as the sockets create the foundation to hold a tabernacle in place, so too do 100 blessings create for us the foundation for our being the Mishkans that we need to be in the world. Because the Mishkan doesn't exist anymore. The tabernacle in the wilderness is gone. But conceptually, the Mishkan does exist. How does it exist today? It exists in each one of us. And since we don't have 100 talents or sockets, what we do have instead is 100 blessings. They make us, each one of us, potentially into a Mishkan. Do you understand? Did I clarify that? We are a Mishkan when we offer 100 blessings. So I guess my question is, how? Why? Why does he think that works? What does a blessing do for you? Right? How is a blessing the step necessary to turn you personally, each one of you, into a Mishkan? Kathleen. Wait, Kathleen, you got to mute. Oh, or you got to unmute, sorry.
I think it reorients us to away from the material and the secular. It reorients us to focusing on God. And it's like in the morning setting your intention for the day. You know, if you're trying to build a character trait, you think about that intention in the morning. You think about how you're going to fulfill that. If some obstacle comes up that you know will come up to thwart that, right? So it sets your intention and it orients you to God so that you're continually in that, because if you're not, then you're easily distracted and led astray.
Okay, very nice. So Kathleen suggests that by reciting a blessing and reciting 100 blessings a day creates a reorientation of our being in the world to focus more on the divine. I would ask, before we get to you, Jackie, is that a fact or not? Do blessings for each one of you, does offering a blessing reorient you towards a greater awareness of the divine? Does it act for you as an intention in your life to move you from the material to the spiritual, which is also what Kathleen said. And Jackie, I promise I'm going to get back to you, but I just want to hold on to this concept first because I think it's an important one. I want to understand it. Do blessings function in that way for each one of you on this Zoom call, or do they not? Stan, and then Steve.
I certainly would say yes. It does, especially do blessings over food, blessings, service, not all blessings, but just the concept of it. I wanted to, as someone who made his living with numbers, I was a computer programmer for 50 years. Going back to just the fact that we're using numbers here in a certain way, it's part of nature that we as humans invented numbers. We invented these numbers so that we, use calculations to explain a lot of things that are part of our created universe in a numerical way. And I think that as we use numbers in our lives all the time, it's a way of, for me also, of looking at the natural world and God existence, you call it. The numbers are really a big part of that. Even if we, as far as I use, misuse them for gematria.
Thank you. Thank you. Steve, again, so I just want to make sure we're answering this question. Do blessings for you create intention? Do they bring awareness of the divine into your life? Do they move you from the material to the spiritual or not? Steve.
I'm going to say no, they don't. I'm more of I think of good deeds. How many good deeds can I do in a day? What kindnesses can I show others? That to me is much more important. But I will, I was happy to hear Stan talk about his background. The irony is, I have the same exact background.
Well, there's a book that I'm try to find, and I'll bring it next week for both of you, about 7 numbers that physicists, cosmologists argue are the 7 numbers that builds the universe. You may know this already, but
No,
it's a fascinating book, and I'll try to get it and share it with this group. Okay, so Steve said it's not about blessings so much for him as it is about mitzvot. It's about good deeds. It's about actions in the world that bring intention to his life and connect him with God. Okay. Others, do blessings, reciting blessings, change you in any way? Do they impact you in any way? Do they connect you? Like when you say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem mina haaretz, or Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat, or whatever it is, does anything happen to you? Are you transformed in any way? Does it give you a chance to rethink who you are in this world? Like as Kathleen suggested. Kathleen. And then after this, we're going to go to you, Jackie.
I think it does do that. And I love what Steve said, because for me, it's easier to go from the blessing to the good deed. He's already a step ahead of me. He goes from the good deed to the blessing. But for me, it's easier to go from the blessing to then I think, okay, what's the good deed? How do I make this blessing real in the world? But I also think the reason it works is it makes God less concealed. There's a lot of concealment of God, even the concealment of our own spark of divinity within us. Sometimes that gets concealed from us, and it's concealed sometimes from other people. They don't see it, or we don't see it in them. And I think as we bring those blessings in, whether it's through resetting our orientation or going even further, as Steve did, setting our actions, then God becomes less concealed to us and to others. And I love that part of it.
Thank you. So I'm gonna share 2 thoughts. Number one is that that's the idea of a blessing. Like when we say after we've eaten a meal, and we say Birkat Hamazon, and the first blessing of Birkat Hamazon is Baruch atah Adonai Hazan et hakol, which means praised are you, God, who feeds all life. And I've just finished a meal and I'm satisfied. My stomach is full. I'm feeling content. And then I say a blessing that says God provides food to everybody.
Right.
Is that the reality of the world in which we live?
Yes. Yes.
Well,
it's there. It hasn't been distributed.
Okay,
It's
George,
there.
very
Okay.
good. Exactly. The
Right.
reality of the world is there is enough food to go around.
Yeah.
The problem is, as George points out, it's not distributed fairly. So maybe, as Kathleen said, the blessing of saying Hazan et hakol leads me to recognize that there are mistakes that have been made, flaws in the system, needs to be rectified, and that leads to the action that Steve talked about, going out and doing something, making sandwiches for the homeless, giving money to support those who don't need, fighting, a system that does a better job of equalizing resources, whatever it may be, or even just awareness that while I am satisfied in this moment, there are lots of people in this world who may be going hungry right now, and I need to be sensitive to that. So that's one comment. The second comment is to reveal God's presence. Jews hold a conception of God that God is not tangible, not seen, not felt, not experienced in any concrete way. And so what a blessing does is it's kind of like a magnifying glass where it holds us up to see things just a little bit closer, a little bit clearer, and to be able to see the hand of God in the things that we are grateful for in our life. And that does reveal God's hand in all things. All right, Jackie and then Anita. Uh-oh, where did Anita go? She was, oh, there you are.
Still there.
Okay, so there you jumped down to the bottom of my screen. So I saw your hand up, Anita. So after Jackie, then we're going to go to you.
So, going back to your original question, for me, I was seeing that as the sockets became the foundation to create the container of the tabernacle, which is where God would abide with the people of Israel. So those prayers that we're saying create that container within ourselves to acknowledge that divine and have that presence of God within ourselves as we move through our day.
That is just beautiful. Beautiful. So how do we fill ourselves is what Jackie is inviting us to think about. What do we fill ourselves with in any one particular moment? Can we fill ourselves with prayer? Can we fill ourselves with blessing? Can we fill ourselves with the spiritual? Or do we fill ourselves only with the material? If we fill ourselves, as Jackie's suggesting, with blessing, with prayer, then we become indeed, right, a living embodiment of God in this world. And isn't that what the Mishkan was supposed to do? The Mishkan was supposed to be, remember what happens. God comes to the Israelite nation at Mount Sinai, reveals God's self. Moses goes back up the mountain, disappears, God disappears. The people of Israel, it's almost like they got a drug infusion of God, and then God disappears, and they need something more. And at that moment, God realizes, I need to build a Mishkan, or I need them to build a Mishkan so that they feel my presence. That's why the Mishkan is created, to experience God's presence. And so what Jackie's saying is we can experience God's presence when we fill our lives with prayer. That's when we embody the godliness within us. Very nice. Anita.
Well, what I was going to say, you have in part already said. When we pray, part of what we're doing, or a great deal of what we're doing, is acknowledging that we're grateful for whatever that thing is, the coming of Shabbat, the eating of the bread, the eating of food. We are grateful that our bodies can nourish. We are grateful that we have a Shabbat that we celebrate. And that causes the body to relax. And when the tensions of whatever life has thrown on you, and you stop for a moment and you acknowledge a gratefulness for whatever piece of life it is, you're throwing away the tension. And that's how I feel prayer helps me spiritually.
Really, really nice. So in other words, we as human beings can be fraught with anxiety, with tension, with discomfort in our lives by taking a moment and offering a blessing. What are we doing? But we are acknowledging that which we are grateful for. And in the moment of being grateful, that might, and it certainly does for Anita, and Anita definitely does for me as well. In that moment, some of my stress or anxiety might be reduced. And then it's not so much that I'm a tabernacle for God, but that I become a sanctuary for myself. That my physical being can be more functioning and better in this world in which I live, because I am a calmer, better version of me in that moment that I just was. And it takes the gratitude blessing to transform the inner anxiety that I'm feeling. How many of you is that also the case? Where for you, you can be stressed, but in a moment of gratitude, it changes slightly the way you are and calms your inner demeanor. Yeah. So for those of you who just raised your hand, do you want to share a little bit about that with us? Nancy, do you want?
Yeah, I was just thinking, when you pray, it kind of puts away, like what you were saying, puts away your stress and puts you in a different space. And you know, you realize what you're thankful for and stuff that you don't ordinarily think about.
Yeah, I can tell you this morning when I woke up to a text from Rabbi Vogel from 5 a.m. asking if I had seen the Jewish Journal and the mistakes that they had made. And from the moment I woke up to the moment I came to Minyan, I was filled with stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
Then I came to Minyan and I began with Birchot HaShachar. And in the moment I began with Birchot HaShachar, I actually felt, as Nancy's describing, a change in me. In that moment of prayer, there was a transformation. Rob, you had raised your hand, or Linda, one of you, you want to share how prayer, may be that transformative factor for you as well? You don't have to. You can say no. But you're.
I'm unmuted. I read a book years ago by Anne Lamott. I don't know if you're familiar with
I
her.
love her. I
do
love her.
too. And she said that the best prayer you can say, and the only prayer you really ever need to say, is the words "thank you." And I have made a habit of saying thank you when something good happens, because I realize that we don't have a lot of control over our own lives, and that the blessings that we get from God are worthy of our being grateful, and that gratitude is transformative for me.
Yeah. The two most important, and I think in this generation, seldomly used words, thank you. Right? Because what is thank you? It's about, as you said, Rob, I'm not in control of everything. There are other people who are in control, and it is for me to recognize that and to appreciate the good that does exist in my life. For sure. Thank you for that. Stan.
At some prayer services, we're able to give thanks publicly for what congregations have done for us, for what people have done for us. And the other congregation I belong to, which is much smaller, than we do it every Shabbat. I go around the room, what are you thankful for? And I get a chance to give a few minutes talk about the people who came before me and made this world what it is. And I think that that's what we have to understand as a blessing, that we live in a world where people have done things for us that we don't even realize or don't even care about anymore. And it's part of my process to feel that I do something for the world.
Beautiful. Thank you. Very nice. Jackie.
So in my field of work, one of the things that I look at is the neurobiology that's happening. So seeing our body as a biocomputer, so to speak, and seeing when we're having a physical experience in the world, how does that affect our body through our neurochemicals or hormones that then affect our nervous system, right? And literally the state of gratitude is the opposite of the state of fear. As far as how it affects the physical body and the brain and the nervous system. So when you're in a state of fear, you're releasing those literal stress hormones, or cortisol and adrenaline, et cetera. When you're in a state of gratitude, those are turned off. And so we actually get into that space of calmness, of peace, of being in a state of abundance and appreciation. It's actually a really interesting thing to be able to make that shift, even in the middle of going, oh, things are kind of stressed out, but okay, but what is working, what is good, et cetera, and being able to self-regulate the nervous system in that way and come into that different state of being.
So in a sense, what Jackie's doing is taking us right back to what the Chidushei Harim is actually saying. Just as he's saying the sockets are the very fabric of what allows the Mishkan to exist. Gratitude is physiologically that which allows us to live in the world in a state of peace or greater peace. That without gratitude, physically, biologically, we don't function well. The only way we can be a Mishkan, maybe not the only way, because I don't want to take away from what Steve said before, which is that actions actually can also lead one to becoming a Mishkan. But an important element to being a Mishkan is gratitude, because that actually physiologically shifts our being in this world. Nice. Judy.
I just want to say how I think it's so important to start teaching this when kids are really young. And I mean, as soon as they start talking, even they can learn to say thank you and go around the dinner table and say what they're grateful for or whatever. But I think it really changes the way they look at things.
Yeah. If we were teaching parenting classes, what we would say to those parents when they first have those children and they bring them home is teach gratitude from day one, because kids begin to feel entitled and a sense of they own the world and it's right for them. And we have to remind them all the time. Absolutely right. Okay, I think we've got this down, right? Mishkan, our Mishkan happens when either we live our life filled with action that Steve said, or through prayer and gratitude like Anita and Jackie suggested to us. Those are the means by which, and Kathleen, that we change ourselves and connect more deeply to the divine. Let's take a look at, oh my God, I had so many questions that I didn't even get to.
That's what you want. That's what we said.
But we'll come back to them next year. Okay, moving along in this last Torah portion of Exodus, I have another verse. Kekol asher tziva Adonai et Moshe, kain asu b'nei Yisrael et kol avodah. Just as God had commanded Moses, so the Israelites had done all the work. Okay, just as God had commanded Moses, so Israelites had done all the work. As an aside, folks, the sages, the commentators of the Torah, notice the language here, and in many places in the building of the Mishkan, is parallel to the language in the book of Genesis when God creates the world. And when God finished the creation of the world, the bracha, the blessing, the passages that we say at the beginning of chapter 2 of Genesis, Vayachulu hashamayim va'aretz v'chol tzva'am, which becomes the blessing for the Kiddush, speaks about God had done all the work. And here that language is repeated, but instead of God doing all the work, it says, so the Israelites had done all the work. And the Maggid of Dubno is going to focus on that last piece. The Israelites, Kain asu b'nei Yisrael et kol ha'avodah. They did all the work. So let's see where the Maggid goes. What is in his mind? He says, the whole, right, the entirety of the Jewish people participated in the construction of the temple. Wait a minute, does he mean the whole of the Jewish people at the time building the Mishkan participated in the construction of the temple? Or does he mean the whole of the Jewish people? In other words, you and me, that we somehow participated in the construction of the temple? Well, let's go further. A parable. There was a king who came to a city whose inhabitants were all poor and run down, and they had nothing to bring as a gift before him. But there was one rich man, discerning in heart, and who was also beloved to the king of the king. Indeed, it was in his capacity to offer the king a gift according to his wealth and station. But he instead determined to help the citizens of the city to gain merit by bringing a gift to the king. What did he do? He gave instructions for the construction of a precious item made up of different pieces of gold, of silver, and of copper. He directed each artisan and each worker in the production of every piece. Do you get what he's doing here? Right? Instead of him just bringing a gift, what he does is he invites the people to create the gift that he will bring to the king. When the work was completed by all of the workers, the rich man took this precious item and went to the king, bringing all of the artisans with him. This piece of work found favor with the king, and he asked the rich man to tell him all of the details of this precious thing. Who were the artisans who gave their efforts for its production? In that moment, the rich man motioned to all of the workers and artisans to come forward, one after the other, to be presented to the king. In this way, just about everyone in the city merited to come face to face with the king. And this is what Moses did. When the work of the Mishkan was completed, work that was done with will and love by all of Israel, he brought all of the Israelites and presented them before God, saying, all of your children, all of Israel, your children, are the artisans who built your sanctuary. Every one of them has a part in your dwelling place. What does this do for you? How does this resonate with you? What does this tell you both about Moses as a leader and the role of a people in creating community, of building a Mishkan, of making a synagogue, a sanctuary, a temple, what it is? How does this parable, this address those ideas? Kathleen.
I think part of it is that, and I don't think this addresses your question necessarily completely, but part of it is when you want to be a vessel for God, right? You have to have sort of an awakening from above and an awakening from below. I got that from some text I read. I think it must have been Sachs. But that it's only when we participate do we integrate God into our life. If God just is a performer of miracles, all the people did was grumble and complain. But if we actually participated and reached out to God as well, that's the awakening from below, that we're reaching up and God's reaching down to us so that we can actually have a relationship, because you can't have a relationship which is totally one-sided. And I think this is the two sides like the wealthy guy that brought everybody together so that they all made it. They were all part of it.
Yeah, it is. That's a beautiful drosh by Rabbi Sachs that you shared about why was it necessary for the people actually to be the ones to build the Mishkan in the same way that they were the ones who built the golden calf, and that God couldn't rely just on God's miracles because that would not draw a community together. And this way, and this rich man understands that. This rich man understands that everybody has to feel in some way that they've contributed in order for them to feel connected. And that the king needs to see that every citizen participated, that it's not just the wealthy that are important, but everybody's important because everybody can contribute in their own unique way. I may have more money and therefore I can contribute in this way, but that doesn't deny in any way or denigrate how somebody else might contribute. And that's what, Moshe, and that's what this king in the parable is trying to say. Steve, I saw your hand up, and then Stan.
To me, one of the I understand and appreciate. I think you're right in the end result, getting the community involved. But I would find this more acceptable to me if it was the mayor of the town or the leader who was elected to represent the people. He engaged the community. The use of the term rich man begs the question: how did this guy get rich? Why is he rich? And there's too many instances of rich people who became, through certain advantages that they have, get this extra wealth. So to me, I find that aspect of it troubling. Otherwise, I agree with your analysis.
So do you remember many years ago the story of, and he happened to be Jewish, of a Jewish business owner, a factory owner, who sold his business and then distributed to all of his workers the wealth of that business because they were the ones who actually helped him become successful. And so maybe, Steve, just maybe, this rich man in the parable is similar. Because,
hopefully.
Yeah, because he doesn't use his wealth to get ahead in his relationship to the king. He uses his wealth in the form of leadership to invite everybody to participate. But the danger, I think, is for sure there. Those who have wealth often have power and often then use that power to determine outcomes that better their own position.
Exactly.
In this case, that was not what happened.
True.
And in the case of Moshe, according to the parable, that's not what happened.
Right.
Moshe is coming along and saying, God, you may see me as the leader, but I'm nothing without these people. You may have instructed me to build the Mishkan, and I'm ultimately in charge, but it was these people that were the ones that contributed. It was these people that the ones who used their sweat labor to make it happen. It's these people that you should acknowledge and recognize. So yeah, I think the danger is there, but in this case, that's the warning to those wealthy people.
Agreed.
Stan.
Well, this story and what we've been talking about just reminds me of the wisdom of Rabbi Schulweis by ending his prayers through me. That's how each of us are responsible for, not asking God, but whatever it is, to do it.
Yeah, Rabbi Schulweis developed a theology called predicate theology. Predicate theology is God exists in this world through me. God exists in my actions, right? It's not so much that God is good, but God is good when I act with goodness. Then I bring godliness into the world. Kind of like what you were saying earlier, Steve, in your comments about actions create the Mishkan. Same idea. Okay, any other thoughts on this text about the parable? So then let's move to the final one, which is, by the way, this first verse, Kechol asher tziva Adonai et Moshe ken asu b'nei Yisrael et kol avodah. Just as God had commanded Moses, so the Israelites had done all the work. Not so that Moses had done all the work, but the Israelites had done all the work. That verse continues with this next verse. Vayar Moshe et kol hamalacha v'hine asu ota ka'asher tziva Adonai ken asu vayavarech otam Moshe. And when Moses saw that they had performed all the tasks as God had commanded, so they had done, Moses blessed them. Again, very parallel to Genesis chapter 2. God saw all that God created, and Vayvarech, and he blessed creation. He blessed that day. He blessed the seventh day. Same parallel language. And so what does Rabbi Yitzhak Yehuda Trunk of Kutno do with this? Moses saw all the work they had completed. Indeed, when observing parts and pieces, one can see defects and lacks. But when one looks at the whole, it is all good. This is what Balak said to Balaam. Then Balak said to him, come with me to another place from which you can see them. You will see only a portion of them. You will not see all of them, and damn them from me from there. This was Balak saying to Balaam. He wanted Balaam to curse the Israelites, but we know what happens, right? Instead of cursing the Israelites, what does Balaam do? He blesses the Israelites. Balak meant that from this vantage, you will see individuals, a portion of a people, and so you will able to see their deficiencies and defects. You will not see all of them, because when observing the totality of the Jewish people, you will not be able to see any blemish. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? Individually, we can even say about let's talk about this from the perspective of individually our life. There are moments where we make mistakes.
Mhm.
There are blemishes that we have. But would we say that that is the totality of our being? We should be defined by our mistakes? Or should we say, as individuals, we're not going to be defined by our mistakes. We're going to be defined by the totality of how we are in this world. And so as an individual, so too with a collective, a community. There are people amongst the Israelite nation who have erred, who have sinned, who have done things wrong. But collectively, as a people, Moses is saying to God, this is a holy nation. Judge us, not as individuals, but judge us collectively. And we can say the same thing about any community, right? There are people in the community who make mistakes. Shall we be judged solely on the basis of those individuals who make mistakes, or shall we be judged communally? There is a lot of negative press about HAMAKOM, not for anything that you all did. Nothing that you did. There are questions about whether HAMAKOM is a community that loves and supports Israel. Mistakes by a few were made. That should not impact how the collective views the totality of HAMAKOM. And this is a text that reminds us of that we need to be judged collectively, not always individually. And as individuals, we need to be judged not by a single moment, but by the totality of who we are. That's what I think this text is teaching us. Lauren.
Doesn't it depend how severe the mistake is, though? I'm not talking about what's happening at our synagogue. Rebecca Grossman comes to mind, and the Grossman Burn Center, and how this family reached out to, burn victims and help burn victims and adopted children, and what a philanthropic family they were. And what are they going to be? And what is she going to be remembered for? And I can't keep getting that. And my son was electrocuted and went to the Grossman Burn Center and had this exquisite care there. And, one terrible day, one terrible incident changed her whole life.
I think Judaism teaches us, right? Judaism teaches us that unless we take the life of another human being, we're forgiven for our mistakes, that we are human.
So she did take the life of those two little boys.
You can do as much as you can to try to do tshuva in this world. You can't take away the death of those two boys. They can never be, their lives can never be taken back. But I do believe you need to weigh the totality of how a human being is in this world. And the totality of how a human being is this world is a tally of really wonderful moments and some not so wonderful moments, and even sometimes some horrible moments. But we need to take in the totality of a person and recognize that human beings are flawed.
Oh, yeah.
And we make mistakes.
Yep.
Other thoughts and comments? Yeah, Leora and then Anita. Uh-oh. Leora, we can't hear you. Check your microphone, your internal microphone, and see if it's on. Go to your Zoom and look to see if you're using your computer microphone or another microphone. And then we'll come back to you. Anita.
I'm taking it from the community sense. And from the community sense, we each have strengths and weaknesses. We each have things that we do excessively well, and that's what people look for us to do for them, or that's our job, our career path, and we're not good at many other things. So when you look at us as an individual, we have the flaws of not being able to do the things we don't do. But as a community, where I'm allowed to do the things that are my strengths, and each of us has that position, then we come across as a community that can do anything.
It's beautiful. That's beautiful. And in fact, if you look, Anita, at the questions that I suggest, it feels in many ways that you're right, that everybody individually cannot accomplish what all of us together can accomplish, because all of us together bring our own unique gifts and talents to the project. And so these questions that I pose to leave us to meditate on: how do you feel when you are in the midst of community? How do you feel when you're alone? When you are with a group, when do you feel vulnerable and when do you feel protected? What leaves you vulnerable and what offers you comfort? And when you are working with a group on a project, how do you help every individual to feel that his or her contribution is important and necessary, equal to every other effort offered by every other person? Because the only way that we can build a strong community, right, is by allowing every single person to contribute in their own important ways with their own wisdom, gifts, and talents. And hopefully going forward with HAMAKOM, that's what we will do, is find ways for each member of this community to contribute with their own unique gifts and talents to build a stronger, better community for us into the future. So, Lior, did you get your?
I think so. Do you
Yeah,
hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Rhonda. There are two things that I would like to say. You know, when you posted and when you said people with money have the feel they have the authority to rule everybody, and I have a feeling that at least what I see, it's true. Unless you are able to look away and show them that this is not going to work for you. So usually people that have money have the power. The other remark I have is, like you said, people make mistakes. We learned it early on with Moshe. He made mistake. He didn't come to Israel. However, the sad part of life and us as human being is that you can do all good to everybody, all good, and you will do one thing wrong, everybody will notice. So
that is true. That is true. Unfortunately, human nature is that no matter how many right things you do, people remember the wrong thing you did. And that's a shame. It's a shame that, and I think that goes back to that idea that we spoke first about gratitude, is if we can step back and say, but what are we grateful for? What are we appreciative of that individual, of that community? That can change the, the view. Judy, last comment, and then we're going to conclude our class.
Yeah, I got the last one. I think a lot of times when someone makes a mistake, well, most of the time, it's not the mistake I remember, it's how they handled it. And I think that's really important. And I think the way you guys are handling this trauma at HAMAKOM is really remarkable. So,
well, thank you for that. I do hope that, we stepped up with contrition and sincere apology to the community for causing the pain that we unintentionally caused to our community. So, all right, everybody. Thank you, as always, for a rich conversation. I'm grateful to your wisdom and look forward to being back with you. I can't remember if I'm back next week or not, but
I think you said you were.
Soon enough.
Shabbat
So,
shalom,
can't get rid
everybody.
of you.
Good
Shabbat
Shabbos to
shalom.
all of you.
Shalom.
Take care.